Good evening. This is Pilgrim Profiles. This is a program of Meadowbrook Congregational Church. We are in the month of November, remembering the Pilgrim's 400th anniversary, the voyage of the Mayflower. Remembering that, I'm reading from histories of some Pilgrim ancestors, and these are sermons that I've written throughout my ministry, and I'm sharing them with you during this month. Tonight we're going to look at John Robinson. I apologize ahead of time. I know the sound quality is not the best. We're trying to work on it, and I think I'm going to have to get some new technology before it gets better, but we will do the best we can, and I hope you can hear me just fine. Tonight we do John Robinson. Next Wednesday, the night before Thanksgiving, we will close with a reading of the history of Stephen Hopkins. So hope you enjoy as we look at John Robinson tonight. John Robinson, I am the pastor of the separatist group at Scrooby, England and Leyden, Holland. My good friend William Brewster once paid me a wonderful compliment. He said of me, "Robinson is a gentleman, a scholar, and a man of the world." Such words from Brewster are no small thing, and I give thanks to God for his leadership with our people in the New World. Let me tell you a bit about myself. I was born in 1576 at Sturton-le-Steeple, England. My hometown was situated on an old Roman road between the larger towns of Lincoln and Doncaster. My father was a small landowner there. I was a graduate of Cambridge University, and after graduation stayed at the college for 12 more years as a fellow of Corpus Christi College. It was an exciting time to be there. There were great controversies about religion, and I enjoyed participating in all of the debates. But when James I came to the throne in England, he promised a most repressive regime. He threatened to crack down on any dissidents within the Church of England. You see, I was a priest within the Anglican Church, the Church of England. I held a position at St. Andrew's Church in Norwich. Early in my ministry, I began to embrace the separatist idea. I believe that each man should take up his own mind concerning his conscience, dealing directly with God rather than through the medium of accumulated wisdom and experience of the church. The Bible should be read and discussed, not just by priests, but by all men and women. Only then can faith be made alive and relevant, sins honestly confessed and repented, lives altered and changed for Christ's purpose. Because of the threat of the king, I left my fellowship at Cambridge and resigned from the priesthood. I returned to my hometown in the year 1603. It was there that I met my wife Bridget, and together we moved to Gainsborough, an old market town on the banks of the River Trent in the country of Nottingham. In due time, God blessed us with 3 children, John, Bridget, and Isaac. I led a group of like-minded separatists there. They had been meeting under the direction of Richard Clifton, but the meetings began to take place in a town called Scrooby, 12 miles from Gainsborough. Clifton was regrettably too ill and too old to make the journey, so I was called to be the pastor. Scrooby was an interesting town. I'm sure that you have heard something about it. It stood on the Great North Road, not much more than an unfenced track on which few people actually traveled. The surrounding area was often used as a rendezvous for bandits and ruffians of all kinds. The manor of Scrooby, which William Brewster administered, was a port house for travelers, a place to change horses, or if they wished, spend the night. The days in Scrooby defined our separatist group. Brewster quickly rose to a position of leadership in our group. A young man named William Bradford came along. We established our own patterns of worship. It was very austere, much more than you practice in your own churches these days. There was no organ music. Organs are the devil's bagpipes, you know. And the only singing we did was in unison. Part singing is frivolous, unbecoming of the house of God. We stood as we prayed, often for hours. Kneeling is a silly popish practice. As we worshiped together, some who previously sympathized with us began to think we were going much too far in our actions against the king and the church. They watched us, they criticized us, they informed upon us. They had us dismissed from our secular work. Some of us were even imprisoned. It was becoming too difficult to stay in England. We knew of only one place where we could go for safety and for freedom of religion, and that place was Holland. In 1608, our first group left for Holland. It was a terrible crossing. It took all of a fortnight, 2 weeks, to make a short journey. Elder Brewster and I stayed behind in Scrooby. We assisted the women and children and weakest in the final group to depart. Eventually, we settled in Leyden, a city famous for its cloth and the home of a prestigious university. It was a charming and dignified place with canals and elegant bridges. I lived in a place called Clock Alley. 21 separatist families lived in the same square with me. The total number of separatists there amounted to 473. Most worked in the trades. They were weavers and silk workers, tailors and shoemakers, wood carters, blacksmiths and hatters, and most of us worked long hours for very little pay. In Holland, we became even more organized. Elder Brewster began to share some of the pastoral duties with me. We selected a widow, a woman of about 60 years of age, as a deaconess. She was a wonderful worker. She visited the sick, she collected for the poor, she reported to the deacons any backslides which she found. I must admit, she also terrified all of the little children in the church. She sat near them with a small birch rod at the ready. Perhaps you could use such a woman among you these days. Shortly before 1617, it became apparent to many of us that our English community in Holland was passing its peak in numbers and prospects. Because Holland was already overpopulated and the standard of living was so low, we could not recruit new members from England to join us. Our young people were showing lamentable signs of breaking loose. We saw other young people pursuing pleasure on the Sabbath. They were losing their native language and their sense of being an Englishman. I was the one who first made the startling suggestion: we should cross the Atlantic. My words threw the community into an uproar. Many were fearful of the perils of the sea, the length of the journey, the utter solitude of the group after landing, the unknown country filled with wild beasts and savages. Yet others saw my idea as an opportunity from God. They did not fear the risk because of the Lord's support. They believed that if they succeeded in the wilderness, they would supply a stepping stone for others who would follow. This group of idealistic people won the day. It took over 2 years for us to negotiate the terms of passage across the Atlantic. Some in the group were attracted to the New Amsterdam on the Hudson River. Others wanted to sail to the Amazon and the City of Gold. But we remembered that we were Englishmen, not Dutch, not Spanish. We looked at Virginia, where the English were already settled. But those settlers were members of the Church of England, and in the end we chose to settle in the northern part of Virginia, an English colony but still a safe distance away. John Carver and Robert Cushman, men of great leadership ability, negotiated with 3 companies about a land grant in the Americas. We agreed to take on other men, non-separatists, whose desire to cross the Atlantic was purely financial. They were called adventurers. In June of 1619, the promised grant and patent were made, and we were ready to go to the New World. Now we had to decide just who would go and who would stay behind in Leyden. Far more wished to go than any 2 ships could carry. In particular, I had to make a difficult decision. Those who knew they were staying behind begged me not to leave them. I was more than willing to sail with the rest, and I would have preferred to do so. I was torn between that which I ought to do and that which I wanted to do. But strong necessity won out. I finally agreed to stay behind in Leiden, under the condition that William Brewster would be with that group when they left. Although he was not a minister, he would provide their religious leadership. We agreed that each group would constitute a complete church, able to make its own independent arrangements. However, if the New World Party survived, our group would join them as soon as possible. July 21st, 1620 was a very emotional day. The ship Speedwell was berthed ready for boarding. The members of the congregation held a special day of prayer. I preached from the text in Ezra, the same text used for scripture lessons on many Thanksgiving mornings. Prayers and tears flowed freely. 66 of our people boarded the boat. William Bradford wrote, "So they left that godly and pleasant city which had been their resting place 12 years, but they knew that they were pilgrims." That was the first use of the word by which the separatist group in America came to be called pilgrims. Early the next day, when the tide was right, the captain announced it was time to go. I knelt on the dock. The rest who were staying behind knelt with me. Tears ran down my cheeks. There was a firing of a small cannon as a parting salute. The big sails jammed into place and the Speedwell moved out into the open water. On July 26th, the Speedwell anchored in Southampton Harbor alongside another more famous boat, the Mayflower. Thus ends my connection with the story that all of you know. The Speedwell began to take water, causing further delay. Eventually, the group of separatists did make it to the New World. All the while, I maintained my hopes of joining my beloved people there. But on February 22nd, 1625, I fell ill. I insisted